Izzat, are you ready? Are you there? Okay, you're there.
Hello.
Great. All right. Is everyone else there? Can I just get some yes, we're here, or okay on the chat? That might work.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Love it. Let's get started. Welcome, Izzat. So we're going to end the day today with our last speaker, Izzat Aziz, who is the Director of Technology, Risk and Cybersecurity at KPMG. Now, he's given me a very short profile. So he's a subject matter expert in emerging technology and cybersecurity. His portfolio covers advisory in innovation technology such as AI, blockchain, fintech, cloud, and Internet of Things. Well, I actually know the meaning of all these. He's a certified Chief Information Security Officer with a pragmatic technology and cybersecurity related experiences. And his track record includes driving maturity in IT and OT. That I don't know what OT is. Industrial
technology.
Operation technology. Fantastic. So he's going to be speaking to us on data protection and technology control alignment to work from home arrangements. As always, if you have any questions in the middle of the session, just type it in the chat, or when we're done, we'll open up for Q&A for anyone to ask questions. And I'll pass it over to you now, Izzat.
Thanks, Amira. So hello everyone. So I'm going to share my screen. Yeah. So I hope today, because since this is going to be the last session for the day, let's make it a bit more interactive. And I really appreciate if you can just pause me if you need any clarification or you need a bit more explanation on the slide I'm going to show. So let me share my screen. I hope it's visible from your end. Amira?
Yes, it is visible. It's perfect. On full screen now. It's perfect.
Perfect. All right. So basically, hey everyone. Basically, like what Amira introduced, I'm Izzat. Basically, I'm a director for technology risk and cybersecurity. So as part of the working from home and all this pandemic realignment, we have observed that multiple organizations struggle, especially when it comes to protecting the environment. I'll deep dive into each and every scenarios where if you put yourself into a hacker's perspective, then you're able to appreciate in terms of how they actually penetrate organization, network, and also how they gain access to sensitive information and confidential data. And with this kind of mentality, right? So you're putting yourself into the hacker's point of view, you were able to actually see a little bit more clearly in terms of what is their typical modus operandi and what's the reason behind those kind of actions and those kind of campaigns. So let's deep dive into the global lens of cybersecurity, because I think cybersecurity is basically is the buzzword for today. And as you know, that when it comes to the cyber incident, it will cover in whether in social media, whether in your text messaging group, or even in your organization site talks. So in the global perspective, there's multiple cyber incidents actually occurred back in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And as you can see on the screen, those are the main things that I think in terms of the value and in terms of the loss events, it is something significant for you to acknowledge and to know that those are the things that happen to multiple organizations that invest probably millions, and some of them are even close to like double-digit millions in terms of cybersecurity protection. But yet they are still vulnerable and still got breached by the hackers. So you see, it's not just concentrated in Southeast Asia or even European or even America per se, but it's actually spread nicely across the globe. Starting from the MGM hotel, I will deep dive into each and every item. We have experienced third-party supply chain attack. We talk about the World Health Organization, where when people start to be slightly more aware in terms of the requirements of vaccination, of all this awareness campaign, and even the registration of the newsletters, they actually use those kind of narrative to lure and also to get your employees in terms of subscribing to these kind of things. And sometimes they even ask to install and also download certain file where it becomes some sort of like they call it botnet, where it will act some sort like a extended control measure So basically, hackers can perform instructions remotely from their location. Then you talk about Mitsubishi Electric data breach, Lazada Redmart, which is very close to our hometown, and also if you see Tokopedia next door in Indonesia, they have a major breach back in 2020 as well. And we have Cognizant Technology Solution Corporation, and obviously I think what we are using today is basically Zoom, right? So starting from the pandemic, where people are asked to work remotely and people start to take meetings on the video communication channels, we start to realize that actually there's a lot of loopholes and there's a lot of requirements in terms of make sure you protect the sensitive information, because the moment you share or you discuss sensitive information, sometimes the video recording is going to be stored on cloud, and sometimes people can just eavesdrop. They become a passive member. They basically participate in those conversations that they're not privy to, and then they will just listen in and also gather all information that they can. So these kind of things will really change the whole landscape. And I think with pandemic, it just kickstart or jumpstart rather the mentality of changing the behavior. Because I think generally when it comes to cybersecurity or even IT security or even data protection per se, everyone are quite aware in terms of what should we do, what we shouldn't do. But when it comes to the behavior side of things, sometimes it does not reflect on the awareness side of things. So because of that, that is why I think talks like this, event like this is very encouraging to actually have those narrative and change our mindset a little bit in terms of what are required as part of becoming, one of the building blocks of the organization. So let's go into the detail of each incident, right? So it's starting from Mitsubishi Electric. So this is back in 2019, where roughly 200 megabytes files were stolen. So the hackers were believed to use 0 days in the Trend Micro Office Scan antivirus, which allowed them to access the initial entry point. So what it means is basically, even when it comes to the legitimate tools, sometimes because of certain vulnerability just made known to the public in a very short span, it will spread across hackers like wildfire. They will try to get the information and they will try to exploit those things. And by having those exploit, it creates a foothold for them to actually entry to the organization network and intranet. And with that access, they will just keep on expanding themselves and get more and more visibility in terms of how the network is designed, in terms of what kind of data that they store, where do you locate and store your data, things like that will be visible from their end. So from this data breach, or rather data stolen, right? I think companies are advised to review and leverage tools. So this is where this conversation is really important. I will cover like what the previous speakers mentioned, the optimization of working from home, because at the end of the day, you want to have convenience, at the same time, you want to have protection. So company are encouraged to actually explore in terms of the tool domain, the technology side of things. So we need to go back to our organization and start knocking on our technology or IT office and ask them, do we have a proper mechanism or control or protection against, they call it control and CNC, so they call it command and control kind of attack. So do we have this? If we doesn't, propose to them to embed as part of their defense in depth, to have the EDR. It's basically endpoint detection and response tools on the laptop itself. So second incident, so it's on the MGM hotel. So this is very interesting. This is right before COVID happened. So personal data of more than 10.6 million guests who stayed in the MGM Resort Hotel, this is globally, was leaked on a hacking forum. So the information leaked include names, phone numbers, address, birth dates, and email addresses of user ranging from tourists, when whoever that visit the hotel, whether it's CEOs, celebrities, and even government employees. So this is something that we need to understand as well, because sometimes we don't realize that when we share or we publish certain information online, right, on website or even on our social media platforms, we sometimes we don't realize that the impact to it, because sometimes they use this kind of information to get more information from you. For example, by knowing your name, your address, and your phone number can be a means of mechanism for them to validate they can pretend themselves as a law enforcement agency, or even your bank for that matter. By having those information, they can ask you, okay, now what is your account number? We need to perform certain validation. Can you share what's your password, for example? So things like this need to be very aware in terms of what we share on public domain, whether it's online or if it's physically. And for that particular breach, right? So MGM discovered there is an unauthorized access to the server that enable the hackers to exfiltrate the data. So from this point, I think it's quite important as well. As part of our coverage, generally when it comes to, the three-layered people, process, and technology narrative, it is really important for us as a human being not becoming the weakest link, because sometimes organizations invest in a very high-end, state-of-the-art technology, and they have very robust and very streamlined processes. However, when it comes to people behavior and also awareness, they are lacking behind. So this is where sometimes hackers, because it's the low entry barrier, where they talk to you, do social engineering, they do phishing to gain those kind of foothold to access your organization through people side of things, which I will cover later in the presentation as well. So companies are encouraged to actually perform a continuous cyber assessment to ensure the control are effective. So these are the things that I think when it comes to working from home, it is really important for every one of us, in fact, to actually start to go back to our architect, the network architect, or even the platform infrastructure administrator. Ask them in terms of what's the new embedded controls and measures to protect organization when it comes to working from home. Because if you still use the traditional protection, it might not be applicable anymore, because now we don't really work from the office, number one. Number two, we have those accesses from our home. So we have VPN, we have all of this access remotely, and hackers can actually get the access to our laptop and gain bigger access to our organization and our corporate. So we need to ponder, take a step back, and really look into the whole mechanism. How are we? What different did we do to make sure that the network is still protected even with remote working? Third one is basically the Zoom video communication, where when the first thing happened, I think across the globe as well, but generally I'm going to focus on Malaysia as a geography. When we start working from home, when the government instruct everyone to not to go to the office, everyone start to go into alternatives where they use whether WebEx, Zoom, Teams, or all these other alternatives, right? But sometimes they don't even have as part of their strategy in terms of adopting those new normals back then. So because of that, because of this so abrupt, right? So there's a lot of hackers trying to take advantage of this. So what they do is basically, like what I mentioned, they quietly sneak into the conversation, into those meetings, and sit quietly and just eavesdrop whatever that been discussed, whatever been whatever been strategized in that particular conversation. They will just take note and take it passively. And second one, whenever you do all these presentation or even board meetings, right? We have noticed as well as they call it Zoom bombing, where the term they use for unauthorized people with bad intention to join private virtual meeting. They read conversation, they do screen sharing of inappropriate image, or even sometimes very inappropriate videos as well. So they show all these very abusive or even very it is something just to create some sort like a disruption during the meeting. So these are the things that we notice as well in the early stage of MCO. And we notice as well, this is something to give back to the principal, right? They have improved significantly in terms of the controls, in terms of the technology and all of this. But one thing to remember and to take note, whenever you are on this particular channel and on this particular platform, just make sure you know what you are required to do. For example, whenever there's people try to access, you need to make sure the configuration said that the people can only access when granted. For example, no video recording allowed. People cannot access without your authorization. Then the link should not be shared across everyone, because the moment you share on the social media or even on WhatsApp, it can be broadcast and people can just simply join in. So you need to have those kind of people side of controls as well. So these are something that end user need to be educated in terms of the application security, to make sure that they know how to configure the platform. Then moving on this is something slightly more bigger. So World Health Organization, I think everyone knows about them. There are 25,000 rather email addresses and password are leaked that belongs to not just WHO but also NIH, the US Center of Disease Control and Prevention, and Gates Foundation. So hackers are taking advantage in full when it comes to COVID-19, especially stealing those information, not just the people, not just the public, not just the citizen, but also those organizations that try to remediate and manage this pandemic. So this is the same thing as what I've shared earlier as well. Organization need to basically go back and take a step back and see a very high level, they call it helicopter view, in terms of, is it still practical, whatever control that we put in place previously, is it still applicable now because of the circumstances has changed? For example, previously you have laptop secured physically at your premise, at your office, in cabinet, but now people are taking laptops everywhere. So in terms of protecting your laptop, make sure that you tell yourself not to keep the laptop inside your car when you're not in, not to take your call in public areas. For example, make sure you connected to authorized access point. So things like that need to keep on reminder, because those are the weakest link that we observe, and because of this weakest link, they manage to penetrate into bigger scheme of attack. And lastly, when it comes to the COVID, Cognizant Technology Solution Corporation has been hit big time, where amounting $50 to 70 million just paid on ransom after the major disruption. So ransomware is something that it's one of the big topic, especially when it comes to cybersecurity, which I'm going to deep dive later on as well. And then we see how we can protect ourselves from this kind of attacks. There's many more. So we're talking about, there's 18 company database leak. This is just in Southeast Asia. We're talking about the record. When they steal this data, what they do is basically they publish in the public domain and they try to sell it for $500 to $100,000. And you imagine people like you and me, sometimes the information are not that worthwhile for them to sell. But if you talk about your C-level in your organization, your CEO, your board members, your chairman, they can sell it at astronomical value, because those information are really important. And with those kind of information, they can perform a bigger, like I said, bigger attack to the organization. Then Experian has breach again, data breach. So there's a lot more data breach. SolarWinds, I think this is something that you heard as well, where third party and supply chain been attacked. So you might be secured yourself internally, but because of certain requirement or certain business use cases where you leverage on third party, that makes you vulnerable to those kind of exposure. So now we need to really identify our third party exposure, our fourth party, and all of these requirements. Because the moment you are leveraging, you are using third party or fourth party platform, you need to make sure they are secure, because they can be a means of the attacks to your organization. So let's take the lens slightly into our side of town. So in our neck of the wood, you can see in this region, we are not isolated in this kind of narrative. So we see there's hundreds of thousands credit card leaked from Southeast Asia country were leaked on online platform. This is something that everyone knows about it. Like the only thing is, the moment you see there's a fund transaction in your e-statement, or even your bank call you that said that you perform certain payment or transaction that you are not doing it, you just need to make sure you call your bank immediately and make sure you terminate that card as fast as you can before you get any more breaches. Data breach, like I mentioned just now, there's 91 million user information leak on Tokopedia alone. everyone staying at home. So now people start to do all this shopping, this purchasing from home. So you see more and more, especially when it comes to the small medium enterprises, where they just open up their e-commerce website. Your staff, your employees can actually have those breach, especially when they use corporate account, corporate email as part of their registration on that particular platform. Ransomware, we talk about cyber attack. In fact, in Malaysian Cyber 999 estimated there's around 3,000 security incident report received just in 3 months duration. So imagine we're talking about almost 1,000 per month. So that is how much security incident happened. This is just in Malaysia. Whether it's fraud, whether it's data breach, cyber harassment, or even malicious kind of virus injection. So we are, even in Malaysia, we are actually exposed in this kind of cyber risk. And one of the biggest is basically the 2020 ransomware, where not just we're talking about corporation, but even the critical function, hospital, where people are suffering and struggling to get all these ventilators, the life support, they've been ransomed. So until they are paid, until the hackers is paid, they won't allow all these hospital or even critical function, critical national infrastructure to operate as usual. So we are not talking about they're not like emotionally driven, or even they don't have empathy, but they are just completely business driven. As much as they can make money, they will try to go to that particular route. So for today's conversation, I'm going to cover 5 major verticals. So this is covering in terms of, so the idea for this conversation is really for you to bring back your organization, to share with your colleagues, to share with your peers, to check with your IT, to check with your technology division. Make sure they have all the control in place. So the control that I'm going to cover is basically covering 3 facades. The first one is basically the people side of things, the processes, where your SOP, your procedures need to be make sure aligned back to your overall framework. And the third part is basically your technology, whether you have the right technology in place to ensure that you are completely protected. And the vertical, like I said, there's 5 verticals. The first one is basically the business email compromise, or also known as BEC. Second one is phishing and social engineering. The third one is ransomware. The fourth one is crime as a service. And the fifth one is basically e-commerce data interception. And you will see how easy it is to actually, even Tom, Dick, and Harry, or even public people with money and credit card can perform those kind of attacks. I will share that elaborate later in the presentation. I'm just going to pause here for a little bit. If you have any question or you want to have any clarification, you can either, I'm not sure how this works, you can either drop in the chat box, or
chat, or
you can even voice out, where we can actually take it live, if it's okay, right, Amira?
Yep, that's fine. It's perfectly fine. So far, all the sessions today have been very informative and very easy to follow. So we've had very few questions. Everyone seems to be like well on board and understands completely.
Okay, that's good to know then. All right, so I'll just continue then. So the first one is basically in terms of the business email compromise, as you can see on my screen. Hold on. Yep. So what it means is basically when it comes to business email compromise, this is the right one. Yep. So campaign continued to top the chart, with the business suffering major losses as it high return investment as low cost to the risk. The data drawn from our private partners show that the use of information stealers has been declining over the last couple of years, but comparatively, the use of remote access Trojan has been growing. This shift suggests, among other reasons, that the cyber criminal behind BEC are becoming more sophisticated, technically proficient, and able to leverage different type of tool to achieve their aims. So generally speaking, when it comes to BEC, you just imagine this. You become one of the processes for the hackers to execute their intention. So if you're working in finance division, for example, they can send an invoice without you realizing it. Suddenly you receive an email from your CFO, but in reality it's not really your CFO, but rather the hacker is trying to mask themselves and pretend they are CFO to instruct certain payment. And if you are in IT, then suddenly if you receive an email from your CIO or CTO instructing you to disable certain tool, saying that we are performing certain testing, please disable this tool. Then you, without without going deep dive into the detail of the email or even instruction, you don't even validate, sometimes can be exposed as well. So with these kind of things, right, sometimes because you're working as BAU, you don't really realize it. And especially when it comes to working from home, a lot of people just take it as is and just want to make sure that doesn't bottle up at their end. So they just pass through. And later on, when it happens, it's just too late. So there's few ways of them actually doing this in terms of the modus operandi. I will share each and every one, so at least we are all aware in terms of the coverage and also they call it TTPs, technique, procedures, and the way they're doing it. So the first one, the bogus invoice scheme. So you can see in terms of the approach, right? So you have first and foremost the cyber criminal compromised employee email, and the compromised account is used to send a notification to customer, and payment transferred to cyber criminal account, and lastly, basically cyber criminal receive the money. So this is basically when it comes to the modus operandi, they are becoming the staff of that organization. They ask, instead of using the same template that you usually use to ask for payment or even ask for subscription bills, they change their account details to their own account rather than a company account. So because of that, so when the customer received it, they'll just transfer directly. And then when you start to basically do the forensic and try to investigate, you start to realize that actually the account numbers have been changed to a hackers, or rather an external kind of account. So this is number one in terms of the scheme. The second one is basically the CO fraud. So what happened is basically the criminal possess and as a company exec and email finance person, finance send the fund to criminal's account, and then cyber criminal will receive money. This is what I shared earlier when it comes to the masquerading in terms of they are pretending to become your CFO, your CEO, or even CTO, or even third-party lawyers asking you to do certain things. And this is sometimes you can actually Google up. There's a lot of CEO fraud or even business executive scam where the CEO did not send an email, but the email looks like coming from the CEO. If your CEO name as ABC from 123.com, they will change it to abc@1234.com, and then without you realizing it, it's actually not from your organization. So hopefully whoever that participate in today's session are aware of this and does not fall into this kind of masquerading kind of scam. The third one is basically account compromise. So what happened is basically they compromise employee account and use to request payment. So the recipient will transfer the payment to the cyber criminal account. And lastly, at the end of the day, the cyber criminal will always win and they always get the money at the end of the day. So we need to make sure that it doesn't happen from the beginning. So what it means is they will create some sort of like a request for payment from whether from your customers, whether from your users, or even your staff. And then when you transfer it without you realizing it, it's actually not the company's bank account, not the company's own bank details, but rather it's a third party or even an external detail without you realize that you actually use the same template. So when you, especially when you copy paste a template or you forward certain template, just make sure do the double checking just to make sure everything is covered properly. The fourth one, this is something interesting, attorney impersonation. So what happened is the criminal will poses as a lawyer and email the finance person again. Finance send the fund to criminal account, and cyber criminal will receive the money. So in this version, the cyber criminal contact either the employee or the CEO of the company and identify themselves as a lawyer or representative of a law firm claiming to be handling confidential and time-sensitive matter. So this is how they play with the human emotion. Sometimes they put the time pressure, they put the sensitive matters, things like that, just for you to unable to actually think thoroughly. And then at the end of the day, you'll fall into this kind of traps. So this contact, they would typically make via phone or email and pressure the party. So basically, you will just call in. They said, I'm from ABC law firm and associate. Please do this. We have just sent you an email. We need to make sure that you approve this kind of payment because we need this urgently. We are working on a different time zone. Please do it within the 5 or 10 minutes because if not, next month your supply is going to be disrupted. And then when you pick up the phone, then you start to realize that if you don't do this, you end up becoming the scapegoat, or even you're going to be blamed. So you just pass it on, and at the end of the day, you will be exposed, and then you'll be penalized because of this. So we need to be very sensitive, and we need to know, and then we need to validate when it comes to this. A simple tips, right? I would give. So whenever people call you, so there's two things, right? So there's two sides. When you call people and when people call you. When you call, whether your bank, whether you call your service provider, whether you call the third party, they will ask for validation because they need to validate you as a caller. But if they were to call you, this is something, you need to make sure you validate them as well. So you need to make sure they have all the necessary information. And then you need to put your thinking head as well to make sure that they are who they claim to be, which is very important. You need to make sure you always do that. Whenever people call you, claim to be this and this, just put on your critical head, just think about it and just ask them again. Are you sure you are coming from this? If you're coming from, example, if you're coming from my telco provider, mobile service provider, right? Just make sure you ask them what kind of service that I'm on. So at least something that they can tell you and you can validate. If they're talking about something that you're not subscribed to or a package that you're not familiar with, then you say, I'm really sorry. I don't think you are who you are. So let's not have this conversation. That is the simplest way to actually manage the first cut of scams and also the fraud kind of narrative. Then the data theft. This is another a common BEC. And this slide is all available to you. Probably later on, Amira and Umi can actually share this slide with you. You can always go to the detail. But generally, when it comes to the data theft, we talk about the cyber criminal will compromise the employee email, and the compromised account is used and request personal identifying information of other employees. And the personal identifying information is sent to cyber criminal account, and cyber criminal will receive this information and they will try to compromise in the next attack. So why is this very important? Example, right? If working from home now, there's a lot of people coming in and leaving the organization. Sometimes you don't even manage, you don't have those interaction. You don't even manage to actually talk to them. Then they can just pretend, hey, we are colleagues, we are peers, we are working in the same department, this same person. Actually, I'm working on this project and then I want some information from you. If you just take it as is, at the face value, you might fall into this trap where they can actually just get all information without you realizing it. And then they will just use those information to expand and gather more and more of your company yellow pages. They will create a directory of your whole company and your team. So this is something that we need to be aware about as well. So these are a few tips that I think it's very important for you to actually have. So the first one is basically you need to make sure you scrutinize all email. Be wary of irregular email that's sent from C-suite executive, especially when it comes to all these, hanky-panky, urgency, important, and all these highlights and all this bold. Just take a step back. Think, take a deep breath, think properly does it make sense first and foremost. Is this something meant for you? You don't receive email from CISO to do something that is not regular or something, not within your portfolio. So just take a step back and also think about it and see whether it makes sense. And then review the email request, especially when it comes to funds and everything, to make sure that it is something that you are supposed to do in a regular basis. If it's something irregular, something that is not normal for you to do, take a step back again, take a deep breath, and obviously check with other people from the same department. So if finance asks, contact someone that you are familiar with at finance, ask them whether if this legit instructions or not. Second tip is basically why employees are the company's biggest asset. They are also usually its weakest link, as what I mentioned earlier, when it comes to the security. So it is really important to have those training, awareness, and behavior change campaign to have all of these company policy aligned back to them. This is something that I always say in my conferences or even in my keynotes, that when it comes to behavior, it is really difficult to gauge, because as much as people are aware of what they should or shouldn't do, like example, the simple thing is you should not leave your laptop unattended at public places. But sometimes, when you are at Starbucks, for example, you're working on something, then suddenly your drinks just been called at the counter. Typically, I think generally I would say that people will just leave the laptop there and then they will just walk to the counter and take the Starbucks. What happened the moment you look back, then the laptop is no longer there. So just you imagine that. So behavior is something that we need to tackle it in a very broader scheme of things. So you need to talk to the HR of how you develop a robust behavior change campaign to ensure that whatever your employee is doing is aligned back to what they are supposed to do. The third tips is basically always, when I say always, you need to make sure you always verify any changes in vendor payment location using basically a secondary sign-off by the company personnel. So if there is an instruction, right? If there's an instruction for you to do something, just make sure that you have a second person to validate it. So if someone asks, a person A from a division asks you to do something, just give another call to a separate person B to make sure that is this something legit. So you have to verify from your end as well. Next one is basically always stay updated on your customer habit, including the detail and reason behind the payment. So the closer you know, the more information you have, the better your judgment will be. So if it's something so suspiciously looking, when you in doubt, they call it, just make sure you leave it out. So whenever you in doubt, just make sure you validate it, call the person just to make sure it's something something real. It's not something just fraudulent or even scams. Confirm request for transfer fund. This is what I mentioned earlier. And lastly, when you are targeted and then you realize actually you're part of the campaign, you receive this kind of email, immediately inform your supervisor, inform your IT department that you receive this email and let them handle it, because they are more experienced, they are okay, they are aware in terms of the technicality and they know what to do. So just reach out to them, let them know that you are in this kind of exposure. I'll stop again here before I move to the next one, phishing and social engineering, if there is any question from the floor. I'm not sure, Amira, I can't really see the chat from my view. I'm not sure.
There's actually nothing on the chat. If there was something on the chat, I'd be writing it down, but I also keep checking the chat. So I think everyone really understands. I do actually. I'm quite enjoying this. I will never leave my laptop at Starbucks unattended again.
There you go. Yeah. So if you can help me, Amira, if there is any chat or even any
I will let you know. I will ask the questions. Normally I'll get them to write the question in, and all my colleagues here will put in where they're from and their name. Then I can address it. Perfect.
So I'll move on to the phishing and social engineering. This is something I think is very interesting, especially when it comes to COVID vaccination, because they always go with the flow, right? So when it comes to the latest trend, what is the buzz in the news? They will leverage on the same wave, the same wind, to actually try to penetrate and to get your attention. And eventually, without you realizing it, you're already in the trap. So I'll go to the next slide. So cyber criminals are exploiting the widespread use of global communication on COVID-19 relating information to deceive unsuspecting victim. We're talking about all this vaccination program, registration, numbers of active cases, COVID cases, positive cases, every daily, newsletters, things like that. They always use the same thing. And now, like I said, for the past 2 years, we see skyrocket in terms of all these relatively similar topic when it comes to all this phishing campaign. They will give you email to your corporate email, right? Please click to this file attached to see the latest news from Prime Minister. There's a new update on the phases 2 to moving to phase 3 in certain location, and these are the instruction from your corporate to actually the instruction of working from office. The moment you press it, little let you know it's actually a malware. Download it to your email, download it to your laptop. So they always use this kind of narrative. And to be frank, from our side, we have observed as well that actually there's a lot of people fall into this victim, and sometimes it's as easy as gathering information. They will just try to get information for you to fill up in forms, but sometimes they have a lot more malicious and disruptive intention, where they even to the level of downloading a ransomware to your endpoints, then they will spread to your organization network. So we see that as well. So malware, spyware, trojans have been founded. This is embedded in the interactive COVID-19 information website. So they will go press here, they will go to another link to your website. Then when you see the website, there's multiple things, and when you press it, there you go. It's a malware or even virus or even trojan for that matter. Then there was a rise of number of spam email as well to deceive user into clicking on links that download malware to the computer and mobile devices. And like I said, this is something that they are been doing for so many years, and now they're just using this COVID-19 kind of topic to actually get themselves ahead of the game. So this is something that I'm going to show. It's a video. I mean, you can hear, right, and see?
Yes, I can hear and I can see. Yes, I can do both.
Ik zie een school tegen Antwerpen.
Ja,
Insecten.
dat blieft?
Je voelt twee insecten op je rug. Kan dat?
Ja, vlinders.
Sloveniet, een moto, oranje. Paard erop. Zenit.
Oui, bien.
Je hebt een vriendin, Julie de...
Ja.
Een boeiend liefdesleven. 3, 4 zelfs.
De vierde, daar zei ik meestal over, dus dat weten niet veel mensen.
Goed, de spiersfeer. Een rouge, balkon. Ja. Ik zie geld, ik zie transacties, maar kent je rekeningnummer van buiten? Ik denk dat ik het wel weet. Er staat wel negatief op je bankrekening.
Ja?
97. Last month, you spent €200 on alcohol. Vorige maand €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. 8.
Ja.
5. Voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. €750.000.
Dat is eigenlijk.
41.
Ja.
Juist.
Ja, dat is het. Oh god. Oh man. Dat vind je eng.
So that is how crazy it is actually, if you notice, right, in terms of what we publish online, because at the end of the day, whatever online is information publicly available to them. And for them to have those information, it is really, it's basically, we are at fault to begin with to publish those. So that's why whenever you want to publish something online, whether it's at social media, whether it's a forum, whether even WhatsApp group for that matter, that because now I know when it comes to all this chat group you're talking about, there's a lot of people, even sometimes to level of even people that you are not aware about, you do not know them personally, you just share certain interests, certain things that end up you're in the same group. So you need to make sure those kind of information is really important, and what information can share and what information you shouldn't share, to end up becoming like what I showed in the video. So generally speaking, when it comes to social engineering, so they are using multiple techniques, and the techniques, as you can see in the middle, those are the typical things that they will manipulate when it comes to the human emotion. So they will create some sort of like curiosity. For example, congratulations, you have won, or rather you have selected as our lucky draw winner. Everyone will be excited, and then you see the cash prize is like 5,000 or 10,000 ringgit. Press here and register the address for your register here and put in your bank detail for us to transfer the money. So people are getting curious and curious. They press and then they will fill in and everything. That they realize actually he didn't. First and foremost, the person suddenly can realize that they are not subscribing to that particular place. One. Number two, they didn't even go to that particular merchant, and they didn't even participate in that particular campaign. After they actually fill out all this information. So that is actually, we always need to take it very cautiously, and also need to understand that they're using this kind of technique. Number two is urgency. What they use is basically, this is quite phenomenal, but it's happening quite often. So you are in the midst of updating your mobile subscription, and if you don't pay within 24 hours, your line will be terminated and barred. So please make payment at this and this, and then you will just do it without you realizing it. Then you will fall in the same trap again. So this is quite common. Third one is basically fear, where I think we can resonate quite well as well. When sometimes people receive call from law agency or even our IRB, our Inland Revenue Board, right? Or even PDRM for that matter, our police, say that you have actually fine tickets that you have not cleared, and because of it, you will be called to the court to clear it. If you don't do this, you will get penalized in certain amount. So please do this and this. Please fill up your information. Please share your bank detail. Please, there's so many things you can do just with fear. Without you realizing it, your mind will be convoluted, and then you just like, okay, let's just get it done. The fourth one is complacency. This is the worst of kind, because sometimes you don't realize that actually they are leveraging on you, and you just say, okay, it's not mine, it's company's laptop, I can just leave it on the table. If it's lost, I just report it. Without you realizing it, actually you are the cause of it, and sometimes it can lead back to you. They will use your ID, they will use your identity. This is something that are quite new as well, but not quite relative new, but it's quite new. Identity theft, they're becoming you. The organization realize it, then they will just go whatever that actually permitted by the organization for you. So they will go all to the places that you're supposed to go, and no process, no technology, no people can detect that, because everything looks legitimate. So this is something that we need to observe as well. And lastly is basically greed. So sometimes you have one, then suddenly they will ask for more and more. So because of that, they will always have bigger and bigger foothold, and eventually they will impact you at your weakest link. At your weakest spot. What are they aiming actually? When we talk about all these techniques, like what do they want actually at the end of the day? It's really boils down to your crown jewels. So each and every organization have different types of important assets. Some of them are their customer information, some of them are their financial portfolio information, sometimes business plan, information rights, all these intellectual properties, or even they still go for money at the end of the day. So you need to identify. So you need to go to your organization, each level, right? We're talking about the middle management, operation and senior management identify those crown jewels and protect it accordingly. If the crown jewels happen to be located at your endpoints, for example, your customer information, if you're handling customer fronting kind of services, make sure if you are using it, you use it appropriately, and whenever you're not using it, delete it. And if you need to store it, make sure it's protected in a way where you encrypt the file, and then whenever you share it, you make sure it's just within the corporate domain. You don't share it with your you don't share the information or the data with your personal email, for example. You don't store it at your personal drive. You don't save it in your thumb drives. Just make sure that kind of mechanism is there. And obviously, the control side of things, from when it comes to technology, the IT need to make sure that those kind of things are enabled. Example, if data protection is not dictate that you are not supposed to use you're not supposed to store information on your thumb drive, make sure all your USB drive are locked. If you need to have some sort of encryption mechanism for your thumb drives. So you need to make sure those kind of conversation is happening, because you are the data owner, right? We are the end user, we are the data owner. We know when it comes to the sensitivity of the data, the confidentiality of the data. Just make sure you articulate it clearly to your technology side, and they will actually help you to build up those control measures and defense in that, to make sure you are protected as a whole. In terms of the phishing, the probability. So before I go to that, generally when it comes to the probability, it's 10%. So if you see yourself in your peers, there's 10 of you, one of you, generally speaking, will actually falls into this kind of phishing and also this social engineering trap. And sometimes it's too late, and then they are sometimes quite shy in terms of even to tell people that they are falls into this kind of trap. So make sure it's there. What to watch out? Basically, just make sure you do your due diligence when you receive the email. Whenever there's a lot of grammatic error, you have spelling error, it will, whenever you sense there's a fishiness to the email or to the instruction, just make sure you validate it, because sometimes they do this kind of lot of errors. The sender address. So if your company, if you work in a company called, example, right, Starbucks, for example, and then you notice that instead of STARBUCKS, they remove the S. Sometimes you didn't realize it, right? So without the S, it's a different company altogether. So you just make sure the spelling is right. And sometimes if your company has all this I or even A, just make sure it's an appropriate A and I and L, not the letter, not the numbers. So if your company called oil firm, just make sure it's OILFIRM, not O1L or OI1 with the number one firm, because then in email sometimes you don't realize it. It's actually a different spelling altogether. Whenever you receive an email, if this is something that you didn't expect it, just make sure you read it 2 times, 3 times, or even 4 times to make sure it is something accurate. Because if you don't ask for it, generally you won't receive it. But if you receive it with attachment and link and all these other login pages, right, just make sure you are taking cautiously. In terms of the industry and trend, if you can see, there's no specific industry per se when it comes to social engineering and phishing, but rather everyone under the sun are impacted, whether you are payment industry, whether you are in e-commerce, logistics, shipping, or even you are a subscriber of software as a service or even webmail, you are exposed to this. And the trend are not going anywhere lower. In fact, 2019, we see the number has exorbitantly increasing every single year. And now the statistic has shown even more. So phishing alone, this is a one year old data. We see the numbers at the moment are going towards above 200,000. Phishing, we're talking about monthly basis, so it's crazy and crazier. So you just need to make sure you're aware, and you know that the numbers keep on increasing, because there's the success factor, like I mentioned just now. In 10 people, there's always 1 person will be impacted and will be exposed. The tips, I won't go into the detail because there's a lot of things, but you can read it through at your convenient time. So when I said, I think the mantra is basically pretty much, if it's too good to be true, it is too good to be true. Just make sure you wrap those ideas around your head, and just make sure that whenever you are receiving something so unusual, it's not because you are the lucky 1%, or even you are the grand prize winner, but sometimes they want more than that, because identity is more than that. I'll pause again here, just in case. And if there's none, no, hold on.
So far, no questions.
Okay.
We just had like comments like being careful with the Insta stories, and I was back to the video.
Exactly.
The video earlier.
Yeah. I'm looking at the chat now. So it's quite interesting to see, because now with all this real-time kind of feed, right, people get more excited in terms of posting where they are, in terms of where they've been, in terms of what are they doing, and those kind of things can really create double-edged sword. So people can know where you have been, and they can use those information to get more information, not to you per se, but to the employer that you are working with. So you always need to have that at the end of the day. All right. So basically now the one of the most hyper buzz rather in cybersecurity, it's the ransomware. So when it comes to ransomware, right? So the number of cyber criminals targeting banks, medical centers, and public institutions for ransomware attack increased rapidly. Cyber criminals believe that there will be a higher success rate given the current medical crisis in the countries. Other critical infrastructure, including the telcos, energy sectors, are not spared. So there's two reasons for them to do this ransomware. Number one is really to create ransomware, to create ransom. So they ask for money. They lock your organization databases, data centers, or even your systems and your platform, and they ask money. Until you pick that money, if you don't have backup in place, you don't have a disaster recovery strategy, you'll be big time problem. You will be, like I said, you have a big time problem. You need to pay, or else you will have operational issue, or sometimes you can't even run your BAU after a few weeks. And the second part is basically just for disruption. Sometimes they just create a major disruption for you to unable to provide your service, because sometimes it's political, sometimes because of their beliefs, or even sometimes because of certain gravitate to certain agenda. For example, if they don't like organization that fund non-renewable energy, they will just disrupt you in that manner, because of there's a bigger agenda at the back of what they believe in. So there's always multiple reasons, but at the end of the day, it's either number one is because they want to gain money out of it, and when it comes to gain of money, sometimes they hit the critical infrastructure, like what I mentioned in Thailand. Not just Thailand, in fact, in European region, last 2 years, there's a major ransomware as well. They locked the entire hospital, so the hospital cannot use all these their telemetry and also all these monitoring systems, because they have been locked until they pay the ransom. We are talking about lives at stake, not just money, lives at stake. So those patients cannot use, all the system. They cannot monitor, the doctor cannot monitor the patients until they pay. So sometimes they even go to that level of extent. So we need to protect ourselves in that manner. So these are the general typical flow when it comes to ransomware, right? So generally they will use a perceived spam message with archive attachment. So they will use all the social engineering, phishing, same way to go into the organization. And then when you press the attachment will be downloaded, or even they will ask you to go to a web page, or even a URL that hosts all these crypto ransomwares. And then this particular ransomware will be downloaded to your computer, to your laptop, and your laptop will actually be the central point of distribution. So you will distribute to your shared drives, your shared folders, your company's databases, your system that you have access to. They will spread like wildfire, and they will actually lock everything. They will start encrypt at the background. Sometimes you didn't even realize, because now the tool is so efficient. It's been optimized, right, after a few years, because these are the business model. You encrypt very fast. The moment you realize, everything is already encrypted. After they encrypt the whole thing, the message will be displayed. They say that, okay, these are the amount. If you don't pay, we will encrypt and we'll keep your data. And worst come to worst, sometimes they say that if you don't pay, we will publish those data online at the public website or even at the forum. And guess what? This is something that are quite bizarre, but it's the reality. They treat the whole thing as a business for themselves. So if you have problem, example, right? If you have problem in terms of understanding how to pay them, don't worry. You know why? Because they have those service center. You have contact us. If you see here, let's contact us. You can call them. They will help you on how you can pay the hacker to unencrypt your file. If you have problem, even in terms of understanding certain language, don't worry. They have multiple languages. You have Spanish, you have French, you have Mandarin, you have Italian, you have English. They can support you in multiple language because this is a business for them. So they handle it as if like they are the legitimate business. They have customer support, they have post recovery. And guess what? After this is a real life example, right? So even after you paid your ransom, sometimes they send an email asking for feedback. How is our service to you? Are we rate us from 1 to 5? 5 being fluent, 1 being you have problems. How do you rate us in terms of your recovery of your files? And if you have problems, don't worry, we will help you to recover those corrupted files as well. So you see, it's a business for them. So it's a income generation, and that's why they take it they take it seriously as well. So those are the on your screen. You see the numbers is keep on increase, and especially when it comes to our side of our world, there's a bit more traction in terms of the ransomware. And in the box itself, right, as you can see, those are the campaign, or rather the targeted sectors based on the ransomware family. So you have Maze, you have Airville, you have Ragnar, you have Endwalkers. So all of this is basically targeting few jurisdiction, few countries, few location, and they are having sectors as well because it's so much so it's a business to them. So they have target operating model, they have business models, and they have all these in place in terms of how they're going to perform themselves. Crime as a service. This is one of the most interesting part. I think now at the moment, if you were to ask me, right, in terms of back in 5 years time or even 10 years time, what's the difference between Izzat, what is the difference between now and before? Those days when it comes, I would just say 10 years ago, back in the early 2010, right, or even early 2000, you need to be a hardcore coder. You need to understand all this algorithm, how to script, how to program the language, and all these things to able to perform certain crimeware, with a certain crime when it comes to cybersecurity, right? Whether it's ransomware, whether phishing, whatsoever. Guess what? Now you can Google it on your own phone, right? You can just Google up Satan as a service, for example, and you will see there's a lot of subscription model and there's a lot of packages that you can subscribe to. So crime as a service is a computer program or basically a set of computer program to facilitate illegal activities. So if you do not know, there's multiple tier, right? If you're technical enough, but then you want to have a program or tool like a rootkit, for example, you can purchase those rootkit. It's already in the black market for quite some time anyway. But if you don't have those technical knowledge, but sometimes you just feel, you know, whether it's disgruntled employees or even you're upset with certain competitor, you want to attack them. Guess what? Don't quote me on this, and I hope you don't use this kind of services as well. It's all available. Like I said, it's a business for them. So you have shadow broker services. You just pay 23,000 US dollar a month. They will give all this data dump service, all the information that you need, whether when it comes to exploit, zero-day attack vulnerabilities, hacking tool, they will publish it there. You just subscribe to them, they will give you everything. Nutino exploit kit, you pay 7,000 a month, you will get an exploit kit that you can exploit any computer. You just make sure that you send that email to someone that you want to attack, and that particular person open it, install it without them realizing it, then you can exploit the end user straight away. Mirai device for rent. Guess what? Now they have infiltrated multiple IoTs, Internet of Things, whether your CCTV, your home, smart home devices, all this Alexa, all this Google Home. You want to perform a botnet attack? Just tell them, depending on how many attacks you want to perform, how big is the volume that you want to attack, they will do it for you. They will ask all these bots to perform DDoS attack, denial of service, distributed denial of service, to the whole system. And the whole system, best case scenario, will be lagging, will be slowed down. Worst case, it will completely go down. So it will just unavailable completely. You can pay 3,000 for it. You have Diamond Fox modular malware services. This is something is quite interesting, where they have you pay 150 per plugin. So depending on what you want, you can send, for example, keylogging. So you just download $150. You send a keylogger, download on your laptop. Whoever use your laptop, press any key, do anything on your trackpad, it will be logged and will be sent back to you. So you can just purchase it at $150. Tox ransomware as a service. If you still do not know how to do this, you just lazy in terms of having all this what do you call it? This technicalities. You don't have those knowledge. Guess what? Just pay to them. As long as you have credit card, you have internet, they will do everything for you. Even phishing as a service, you can pay as low as 15 cents US dollar for them to actually do the phishing for you. Say they will send, okay, say you want to attack Amira, for example, or even Umi. Just tell them these are the email address. This phishing as a service will send the email for you. You just need to make sure you pay them via credit card. So those are the things that's already available. And that is how easy now attack can be conducted and can be executed. Anyone now can do it. So the last one is basically e-commerce data interception. So emerging and imminent threat of online shoppers, like what I mentioned earlier, has created a different traction altogether, especially when it comes to people now moving to virtual purchasing, virtual shopping. So people are intercepting those data, and basically different kind of malware, such as example the GS sniffer in the underground forum. They not only enable cybercriminal to launch malicious campaign against e-commerce platform, but also they have the functionality to even detect and investigate. So they do interception in between. So when you want to purchase something, they are becoming the first person. So if you purchase item A, you pay item A, you imagine this. So you are on an e-commerce website, you purchase item A. When you press item A, at the back end, the hackers will say, not just item A, but get item B as well. So when the bill comes, you pay for item A and B without you realizing it. So those are the things that are emerging. And obviously, in this particular geography, Southeast Asia or even ASEAN, we see there's a big traction when it comes to getting all these e-commerce and all of this. It become more permanent and become more prominent in terms of using this. So they are making almost $300 in terms of the growth. They notice that they expected to have roughly $300 billion by 2025 due to increase, all these young internet consumers and all these high mobile internet connect penetration. As you can see, these are the market size, and it's growing almost double. So from total amount, you see 12,000 data. 2020 is like 28,000. The data dump from 30,000 to 70,000. So it grow significantly. So that's few key takeaway, right? I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, everyone will bring back something to the organization, and hopefully they are becoming a better and more aware and behave better the keyword is basically behave better when it comes to cybersecurity management. These are the few items, I think, in terms of protecting best practices in protecting yourself at the working from home. Make sure you identify your crown jewels and protect company crown jewels as well. Keep company asset protected. Make sure your laptop is locked. You know, your screen is locked whenever you're not on it. Make sure it's you do not leave it unattended anywhere, any place. Make sure it's locked and protected. Connect to known Wi-Fi. So whenever you are public area, you think your internet is slow, but whenever there's free internet, just remember this: when it's free, there's always something else to it. So make sure it's secure. Make sure it's legitimate Wi-Fi, not someone that just create a broadcast access point for them to entice you to go in. And whatever you browse through, whatever you access to, they will have that visibility. They have those interception in place to actually have their own benefit from that side. Don't ignore application update. Whenever your IT asks for, laptop reset, laptop restart, make sure you do the update and restart. Don't delay if you don't need to. Avoid pop-ups, unknown emails, and suspicious links. So whenever there's pop-up, don't immediately click. Think about it first. Unknown email, you need to ask yourself whether did you ask for that email or not. Suspicious link. If the link does not bother you, does not concern you, just avoid it. Don't press all together. And if you feel that it is something targeted, reach out to your technology, reach out to your IT, or reach out to your IT security to make sure they manage those as well. Because you might be safe, but your peers, your colleagues might not be as aware as you. So by telling them, at least they can block those email from getting into your corporate email gateway. Be more aware on your surrounding. Whenever you take your meetings, your discussion with your laptop, remember there's people walking behind you, next to you. You can do shoulder surfing, things like that. Just make sure you're aware. When you take phone call, make sure you don't disclose publicly all the sensitive information. Make sure you be sensitive as well in terms of what you are talking about, right? Because sometimes people just sit next to you and try to listen and just to eavesdrop and gather information as much as they can about you or your company. And lastly, keep your password strong and private. Don't share your password. Don't paste your password on your laptop screen. Don't keep it on a written form under your laptop or your sticky notes, right? Because sometimes they say, oh, it's so complicated for me to remember, so I need to put it in so it's easy for me to put it in because I have 10 passwords to remember. Don't do that. Just make sure it's properly secure. These are the few statistics I would like to share as well in terms of the password cracking. So if you're using 7 character or 8 character, depending on your organization, you can just use this table, right? If your organization asks for 8 characters password and it's a simple password, just lowercase, guess what? It just takes 4 hours and 7 minutes to actually crack those passwords. But if you use complex password, including all these uppercase, lowercase, number, and special character, it's not that long, 6 months. And guess what? This number is getting lower and lower every single time because they are using all this AI, machine learning as well from the brute force standpoint. Hackers also using those kind of technology. So make sure you have all these complex password. And I said minimum at least 9 character, because 9 character, at least if you use a complex password, it would take 1 millennia and 6 decades to actually crack your password. And don't use all these common password. So back here, so based on the statistic last year, these are the 5 most common password used on the corporate systems. 1, 2, 3 until 9, QWERTY password, QWERTY 1, 2, 3, 1Q2, W3E. Don't use this. Use something more personalized and use a paraphrase. Example, I need coffee instantly. Then use I instead of I, use 1. Need, you use capital N, EEED, all capital. Coffee, CO, then you use your own way of doing things. Then instant, then you put asterisk. Example, use paraphrase. Easier to remember, more robust. And if you use 12 character, it will take century for them, or even 15,000 millennia to actually crack those paraphrase for you. This is another video. Let me just make sure it's playable. Can you see my screen?
So back to this this hack, this Equifax.
Yes.
I mentioned earlier they may have compromised the information of 143 million Americans, which is a lot of Americans. So in light of this, as a service to the public, we've actually done this before, and it's very effective. We asked people who are passing by our theater today what password they use to protect their personal information. And pay attention, please, because there are a lot of important tips to be shared here.
We are talking to people about the cybersecurity breach at Equifax, and in light of that, we're asking people how secure their internet passwords are. What do you use for an internet password?
You know, I usually stick to my last name. That's probably not the best thing to do, but I usually stick to my last name, a few digits, maybe like a hashtag or something, or
How do you spell your last name?
Walker.
Walker?
Yeah,
W-A-L-K-E-R?
yeah,
And then just a few numbers?
yeah. I probably should do
And then a
that.
hashtag.
Yeah.
The numbers like, what do you use, like your birthday or something, your area code?
Yeah. Usually like my birthday,
How old are you?
21.
What day you born?
November. No, day, sorry. The 29th.
29th of November?
Yeah.
So Walker, 11/29/95.
Woo! I probably shouldn't say that, but
That's okay.
yeah.
How strong is your internet password?
Strong.
What sort of things do you use?
Capital letters, lowercase letters, numbers, characters, everything.
What's the current password you're using?
I don't really want to tell the current password that I'm using, to be honest. Not necessarily. Well, I mean, I guess, you know, like 63XJ9 @ symbol, basically all characters, pretty random assortment, and I just try to
Do you use
remember.
that one?
Yes.
Thank you. What is your internet password that you use for your email?
In and out 2017.
My internet password is capital W @TER capital B 0 NG waterball.
Yeah, you know.
My internet password is okay.
Yeah.
Mila for what MILR64.
Well, that's nice. Now Americans can hack into a Russian website. No, it'll be fun. Oh, so what is your name?
Jerry Reed,
Jerry, where are you from?
Whittier, California.
What do you do out there besides scare school children? How strong is your internet password?
I'd say pretty strong.
Yeah, what sort of things do you use for it?
You know, things that I like.
What sorts of things do you like?
Maybe a dog, an animal, a place I've been, someone I know.
So like Rover mental ward.
Yeah, something like that.
All right, well, don't worry.
Don't worry at all. Your secret is very safe with us, okay?
Well, thank you.
Okay, we're going to just keep this between all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So yeah, you see that is how easy it is actually to break your password. And especially when it comes to emotion and also asking the right question, they will actually really able to actually get your password then. So yeah, and I think these are the add-on, just the last bit before I conclude my session. So these are the things that are at the moment is quite new to Malaysian market, but we see it's coming in this, especially when it comes to the touristy area. So what they call it is basically a juice checking. They offered free charging, or even they provide a USB port for you to plug in your cable to charge your phone. So they are using this kind of USB, basically not just to let you to charge, but rather at the back end, they actually try to extract information from your phone. So few things: disable your data transfer features on your phone. Carry your personal power bank, that's the best. Don't use this kind of, like say, when it's free, there's always Second, there's always other side of things where they will take advantage of. There's even if you quite particularly in these kind of things, there's even USB cables that only meant for charging. So you cannot transfer data with that USB cable. So probably there's something that you want to consider as well in your shopping cart. And lastly, just switch off your handphone if you don't need to use it. Just while charging it in the public area, just leave it off. So I think that's about it for today. We have 10 minutes for Q&A before
yes, we do.
Call it a day.
It's a very clear topic actually, and then listening to it, I feel horrible because I realize that my laptop is A, not secure, B, my application updates are always ignored. I spend my time shoulder surfing other people. My Starbucks. My passwords are horrible. No, actually now they're better. They used to be bad. ASDFGH 1 2 3 4 5.
That is your favorite place.
I know. And then I would try to skim free Wi-Fi from my neighbor all the time.
God.
So I feel
what you need is now just subscribe to one of the module. You become a full-fledged hacker.
I think so, right? I think I should.
Then there's more reason for me to go to the client to get more jobs, to protect them from people like you.
Exactly. Or I have to start focusing on wearing the horse blinders and not shoulder surfing anyone.
Yeah.
Anyways, does anyone have any questions for Izzat at the end of the session? I think there were some people mentioning that the video earlier, the second video about the password things, it wasn't moving. So I did share the slides with them, they can watch the full video in a moving manner later on. But yeah, does anybody actually have any questions or anything to share? Or feel like me where I failed every single checklist on that.
Anyway, if we don't have any question or answer, you can always reach out to me. I'm more than happy to take it offline as well, or even online. You can find me on LinkedIn or even through the organizer. If you have questions, you can post to them. Then I'm more than happy to answer.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Because if anyone has any questions later on tonight or tomorrow, you can just let us know, and we will send it across to Izzat to help address the questions. But if you don't have any questions, I think it's the case here. I'd like to say thank you very much, Izzat, for taking an interesting topic, because it really hits close to home. And I think not just for me, I think for everyone as well. So yeah, it was really good. Thank you so much. Got comments coming in now. Oh, there is a question. Great. There is a question from Evangeline Justina from Columbia, Asia, if I'm not mistaken. She's asked you, what is your take on infringement on personal space when personal mobile phones are being used for work purposes?
So this is very important, right? Because I think in terms of the personal phone, there's two types of use cases. One they call BYOD, bring your own device. That means you use your device as long as you install and meet all these corporate policy requirement. You're able to access their email, access the internet, and access all those files. And the second part is basically call it COPE, company owned personal enable. So company will purchase a phone for you. They will give you all the requirement, and they will harden the handphones, and then they will allow you to use it. So it really depending on which part. If it's your BYOD, the first one, bring your own device, that means your own one, which I suspect it to be from Evangeline. I think the one thing that you need to rest assured that there's a model called MDM, Mobile Device Management, where they will segregate those personal and also your corporate stuff. So there's no, in a way, even when they ask for permission, you will not notice the permission will be very explicit in terms of what would the function will do. If you use Intune or Mobile Iron or these kind of things, if you use your handphones, they will ask for permission. Just make sure you read the permission. They won't ask for contact access. They won't ask for your Gmail access. They won't ask you your game arcade access or whatsoever. But rather they will just containerize in terms of what is required for you to perform those kind of to perform your day-to-day role. So there's no interlace, but rather it's a proper segregation. So they will have those proper in place. So it's not really going into your personal space. Your pictures and everything will not be taken into corporate side of things. And they have those, because it's under ours in Malaysia specifically. I'm not sure if we have any callers from or participants from other jurisdiction, but we have a Data Protection Act. We call it PDPA. Back in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, it dictates clearly in terms of how we can actually use these kind of things.
All right. I think Evangeline is quite pleased with your answer. Explained pretty clearly. Does anybody else have any questions? I think sometimes what happens is that they are typing a question, it's taking a bit of time, and I'm just talking too quick, so it doesn't have enough time for the question to come out. We only have 6 minutes. Very punctual. Don't worry, our Zoom is paid. They won't cut us off at 40 minutes. Yeah, I think well, I'm going to make the assumption that no one else is typing. So if anyone does think of any questions, we can still take questions later on tonight or even tomorrow. Once again, thank you very much, Izzat. Really appreciate your time, and the topic was very interesting.
Glad everyone like it. Glad you like it. Stay safe, everyone. I hope we become one. Now we need to challenge ourselves. Instead of becoming the weakest link in terms of the people, process, technology, let's show our employee that human people, employees, is one of the strongest now.
Agreed. Let's try that. And thank you so much once again. And for everybody else, this brings us to the end of today. Tomorrow morning, we will commence again at 9 a.m. So we will see everyone back here tomorrow morning. Thank you, everyone. I think Umi has shared the link to download the slides a couple of times. She'll probably be sharing it again shortly. If you've got any questions, email us anytime tonight, or we'll see you all tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Izzat.
Yep, stay safe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Izzat. Thank you, everyone.